big the power or how enormous the power would be if we were going to have a government that initiates police action where there are no complaints. I mean, there basically would be no limit to where you could look. And so I guess the first thing that comes to mind is I think of sort of we're going to have the police selling illegal cigarettes, trying to get people to buy them. Or, you know, the thing is I imagine you going into a business where there's been no complaint, and you're like, you interview someone, you don't get what you need, so you keep asking another question, another question, another question. You finally get to a question where the guy says, oh yeah, I'm tired of old people, you know, coming in here. And then all of a sudden, oh my goodness, now we can do something. Do you realize the downside of the unlimited nature of going after people with no complaint, and that what this is going to do to business? And I mean, do you not understand that we've got to somehow balance that we want people to have jobs? You're going after law-abiding people where there's been no complaint and you don't feel at all any compunction or guilt over what you're doing. I mean, how can you show up to work? How can you show up to work with a straight face and prosecute people where there's been no complaint? How can you do this? I don't understand how you wouldn't resign immediately and say this is abhorrent. This is so against what everything America stands for that you would go after people where there's been absolutely no complaint, run them through the ringer, and use the threat of your bully nature of your office to punish business, and as a consequence, punish their workers.
Well,
I don't get it.
Let me say a couple things. First of all, Senator, my mother owned a shoe store for 15 years, and so that's the family I grew up in. So I understand the challenges of a small business owner.
Ask her how she would feel if you came into her business and started harassing her over her hires.
Secondly, let me just again answer your question with respect to the structure of the agency. I take the cases that are recommended to me from the investigation. I am not in charge of the investigations.
All right, okay? Let's say you were. Let's say you were in charge of EEOC and you could make policy. Do you think this policy of entrapment, of going into businesses that have committed no crime and have had no complaint and ginning up and looking for something, isn't that abhorrent? If you were in charge, would you fix it? If you weren't told by anybody, would you commit this crime of entrapment on people? Would you do things differently if you could make the policy?
I disagree that what the commission is doing is entrapment. And let me just give you an example.
Most agree with the policy then, so don't defer to someone else. You agree with the policy.
Let me give you an example. Most individuals who are discriminated against in the hiring process do not know that they've been discriminated against because employers usually do not say that they've been discriminated against.
We're going after mythology then. You have no idea. No, the people who've been discriminated against don't know it, and the people who've done it don't know it, and you're going to come in as the arbiter of thought, and you are going to decide what's correct. Realize there's a penalty. We have an enormous amount of unemployment, millions of people unemployed. Do you think you're helping employment or hurting employment?
Let me just say that the commission in 2006 in the Systemic Task Force report said that the use of directed charges and commissioner's charges, both authorized under the statute, are important tools of the commission.
Baseless charges.
It didn't say baseless.
Well, baseless would be without complaint. You have no base until you go snooping around looking for a problem that no one complained about. You agree with this policy then?
I agree. In some instances, you have victims of discrimination who are intimidated to come forward.
I just can't imagine that if we were to talk to real people in the real world, they couldn't imagine that you would go after businesses where people don't know they've been discriminated against. There's been no complaint of this. And you would go after and persecute these businesses, put them through hundreds of thousands of dollars of legal fees. You realize there are jobs lost in the process. You realize if a business is teetering, whether they survive or not survive, that you can bankrupt a business through the bully nature of your pulpit. You have 70,000 backlogs. Why don't you fix your backlog before you decide to go out and persecute American businesses? For goodness sakes, how do you explain your backlog? You have 70,000 things waiting where people actually had a complaint. A real, maybe valid, maybe not, but at least a complaint. And you're going to go looking for things in businesses that have no complaints. I think it's absolutely inexcusable. I think it's un-American. I think it's dishonorable. I can go on and on and on. I hope you will rethink your position on these things. It is something that we should eliminate, and I'll do everything in my possibility to make sure you're not allowed to do it anymore.
I would say to my friend from Kentucky, if we had 32 intellectually disabled individuals working in a turkey plant in Atlas, Iowa. Some had been working there for as long as 20 years, housed in deplorable conditions by their employer. After 20 years, some of them had nothing to show for it, not even a penny to their names. Intellectually disabled. They didn't file a complaint with the EEOC. But someone was watching this and tipped them off and said, you know, there's something funny going on there.
That sounds like a complaint.
No, it wasn't a complaint.
And we're not talking about the mentally incompetent. I'm sure we could have exemptions.
It was not, I say to my friend, it was not a complaint. They just were, and then they started an investigation of a legitimate business that was operating in Atalissa, Iowa.
I have a business in Kentucky, and they will not even reveal who made the complaint or if there's a complaint. And here's my question. How many times are you doing this? Hundreds?
I'd say to my friend from Kentucky, I'm not certain I ever know who tipped them off about Atalissa. But they took it under advisement. They started an investigation and found a cesspit. A cesspit. And
should you be able to confront your accuser?
By the way, that company, Henry's Turkey Service, because of the judgment against them of $240 million, went bankrupt.
Should you be able to confront your accuser? In America, should you confront your accuser, or should your accuser be anonymous?
There was not an accuser. There was a tip-off, and they found that these people were being employed and discriminated against in violation of all kinds of different Civil Rights Act, but mainly the Americans with Disabilities Act, among others. So I say to them, there was no complaint filed. These were intellectually disabled people. They had no knowledge that they were actually being discriminated against.
Yeah, but here's the thing. We're looking at a service industry where you have a lot of young people working in the service industry.
I just asked my friend, do you think the EEOC should have investigated that or not?
It sounds like yes.
Well,
but here's my point is, we have a service industry, restaurants. We have a restaurant chain that's being harassed in my state. They have young people work there. Young people work in the service industry. Is that enough of evidence to persecute them for age discrimination? That's ridiculous. It is an absurd abuse of government. It should end.
No, what the senator from Kentucky, what I heard him say, I'll check the record, I don't know, but I heard him say it was abuse of government power to investigate these kinds of things when there's been no complaint filed. I just gave an example of one where no complaint was filed, but I thought it was a very legitimate use of the government using the laws that we've passed here to go ahead and investigate what someone tipped them off to be a very egregious violation of civil rights laws. And so I think in those cases, yes, the government's doing the proper thing by protecting people who otherwise have no one else to protect them. And I just want to make that case that it doesn't have to be a complaint at all. And I went over my time too, Senator Alexander. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Senator Franken.